Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Regista Football Podcast. My name is Jack, and once again, I'm joined here by my good friend Ben. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Jack.
Doing great? Still
I'm
doing
doing
great.
great. I'm still doing great. I'm still living off that. I'm still living off that win.
I love it. I love it. We have a packed show for you guys today, or a very focused show, I would say. Our aim here is to preview Liverpool, West Ham, Arsenal, Chelsea, and then we're going to do a relatively comprehensive breakdown of the differences between the previous Chelsea manager, which was Enzo Maresca, and the new Chelsea manager, which is Liam Rosenior. So look at that as a good opportunity to talk through that. How does that sound to you, Ben?
I'm looking forward to it. I think I enjoyed our analysis we did last time. Looking forward to getting into it this time.
Yeah, it's a similar framework, so I think you guys will kind of get the same type of value from it. But let's get into the first game, so Liverpool West Ham. What have you seen from West Ham this season, Ben?
Um, I'll be honest. I was surprised about how poorly they're performing at the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, I thought
Agree.
that they would be doing a lot better. And I think it's take them a little time to kind of reset. And now that they have, it feels like the team is functioning very similarly to how Force was doing about 2 years ago. Like they
Similar,
are in
yeah.
this relegation battle, but I think they're gonna try to work it out. Um, I think overall in this next kind of set of fixtures, it's gonna be really difficult for them. Just looking at the kinds of
Yeah,
matches that have coming up, they have some of the harder sets of matches. It's really make or break it for West Ham right now.
it is. I mean, we could overlook the game. Kind of big contrast to Liverpool, where Liverpool looking for like a third successive win means we kind of put pressure on the teams that are above us in the Champions League race. The adverse really is West Ham, who are in the relegation zone currently, looking for points to keep them in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Liverpool have played them once this season, and there was a 2-0 win at their place with a beautiful finish from Isak. Do you remember that goal?
That was good.
Yeah, it's actually, I think, was that his first Premier League goal? I think it was for Liverpool.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, what could have been? What could have been?
I
Let's talk
think
a bit. No,
one
carry on,
yeah,
by
yeah.
all
One
means.
more thing that's surprising is I was just looking at West Ham's performance in the last five, and they sit seventh
Hmm.
at the table right now in the last five with 8 points. Liverpool's right above them. So, I mean, there is a gap between these two teams, but with like more recent performances, there's not that much of a gap.
No, you're right. West Ham, I mean, we're definitely getting to the format element of it. In terms of injuries, let's start on that first. West
Sure.
Ham have one of the more healthy squads in the Premier League, Ben. Potts is really their only injury, who's been typically a sub for them anyway, so they're not like actively missing a bunch of first team players. So they go into this game relatively healthy and in a really good vein of form.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in their last five. I mean, this is a potential relegation candidate anyway. 2 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws in the last five. They average 1 point per game away from home, which is obviously this game is at Anfield, so that stat is important. But as you touched on, they have seen an uptick in form in the last 8 games. Their season average is 0.93 points per game, which obviously isn't good enough to stay in the league most of the time. But the last 8 have been a huge increase, which is 1.38, which is almost like a 50% increase on what they were doing early in the season.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if they can continue doing that, because ultimately I think not much has changed essentially from what I can see. Ultimately, getting better variance has helped them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you look at this, they do score more away from home than the average Premier League side. West Ham are 46% in terms of their previous games likely to score from away from home, and then the Premier League average is 38%, so they're slightly average there. So they
Yeah.
do have like better average performance away from home. They kind of have that type of, I guess, playing style to stifle teams away from home, especially the top teams. I've seen a few games with them this year, especially against United more recently, where United kind of struggled. That I don't think that was away from home though. I think that was at West Ham's place, but it shows they can be resolute and defend quite deep. Ben,
Yeah, I think it really surprises me that they have a 46% uh, first to score away from home
yeah,
versus that 38. Like that just, I guess that means they're able to get that goal against teams when they're really pressing. And I
yeah,
feel like that also comes as an individual contribution, probably more than anything else.
I agree with that.
That Yeah, that is quite surprising though.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about their style. I'll give you guys some stats, and then I'll try and paint a picture based on those stats ultimately. So they rank second lowest for average possession per game in the league with 42.4. Who do you think the only team below them is, Ben?
Burnley.
Yes. Nailed it. They rank third lowest for average passes per game with only 90 passes. Actually, per 90 with 370 passes per game. 90 passes is almost nothing.
That is, yeah.
Um, they rank seven lowest for pass accuracy per game. What that suggests to me is they play quite a lot of long balls per volume. Mainly because if you're going to lose the ball from a long ball, you're not
Mhm.
going to have subsequent passes in that possession sequence. So it makes sense that they have a lower volume of passes, and they also rank seven lowest for pass accuracy because they're playing a bunch of long balls.
Mhm.
They do rank fifth highest for long balls over the season, which we do. I don't know. I do feel that makes a bunch of sense. They're not typically known to be like a prolific build-up team. They play long to their. I mean, in the last few weeks, they've played with two strikers. They're basically playing a 4-4-1-1, and most of their game is predicated on being able to play to them long.
Mhm.
They don't have the best defensive output. 7.1 chances created per game. That's among the fewest in the league. And then 10 shots per game, which is in the bottom five of the league. So they're not the most prolific when it comes to defensive output. But ultimately, I think the picture, those stats pace, at least for me, is direct team. They favor long balls, specifically over structured build up. They're not much of a, like I said, a prolific build up team. They're not looking to do that.
Mhm.
They do have an emphasis in terms of the way they play on like transition driven attacks. Forward vertical passes into half spaces, they really, really benefit that. In fact, sometimes what they'll do is they'll have wingers go very narrow if they can find specific positions in half spaces. Think Bowen, Somerville.
Mhm.
Quick progressive passing combinations, like the aim isn't supposed to the aim isn't to control possession, it's to get the ball forward as quickly as possible. Even
Yeah.
if that's passing long, they're happy to do that. Or they if they are going to build up and they are going to approach it in like a more structured way, they'd rather play forward quickly, and as soon as they can play into the pivot players, they'll do it.
Mhm.
And they also, we know this, they love direct runs into space behind the opposition. I feel that's a big reason why they signed Callum Wilson. Callum Wilson is definitely that type of, run off the shoulder type of striker, one on one with the goalkeeper. And when they do build though, West Ham, they build with a kind of like a 2-1 or a 2-2. They won't circulate around the back for a long time. Like I said, their aim essentially is to get the ball into the forward line as quickly as possible. They like to kind of deliver quick balls into half spaces very early, more often trying to bypass the opponent's press or like really moving it quickly within those pivot players, like I said.
Yeah.
The way they do attack is quite structured. Oh no, not structured, but like very balanced. So they're not like right side dominant. So I think of Arsenal as really right side dominant. I think of
Yeah. Yeah.
Liverpool traditionally as very right side dominant. They are very combined in the sense that they so like center 23% of the time, right 22% of the time, left 20. So like they have like really good spread when it comes to the way they like to attack. I'd say in
Mhm.
the last few games where their form has been better, you've seen like a huge uptick in how Somerville is playing. And I think that's a really big part of how they play, especially like the way they actively want their wingers to create chances and get on the ball. I'd say specifically Bowen, but Somerville does qualify for this as well. In possession, they're out of possession, their wingers are typically told to stay relatively high and wide to receive balls, to essentially drag defenders wider when they do receive those balls from counter-attacking situations.
Mhm.
I'd say Somerville more than Bowen for this one, but they're both still quite effective, like 1v1 dribbles or kind of overlapping fullbacks, creating space for crosses for those two,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to how they've started approaching forward line in the sense that they have two forwards essentially crashing the box a lot of the time. They like to cross early, big looping crosses for guys in the front and back post, and cutting inside and scoring with a strong foot. I mean, ultimately, that's what we know that's what we know of Bowen, right? Like
Yeah.
he cuts in, he scores, he's relatively prolific. Is there anything that I described there, like in possession, Ben, that you have specific comments on or you want to elaborate on? Because like we've
Yeah.
watched West Ham for a few years. I
Yeah.
don't think the thing I always find kind of funny about West Ham, and I'll be honest with you, regardless of what manager tends to be in charge there, they tend to play a relatively similar way.
Yeah, and I think that kind of takes up like how does that team composed and who's in that team. It doesn't you don't see a lot of major changes in that team and the
You're
kinds of
right, yeah.
styles of people that they're signing and the kinds of people that they're playing. So you kind of have to play that system. That 2-1-2-2 buildup is also quite interesting for a team that may not well, you kind of need to do that kind of build up for a team that needs to be a bit more direct
Yeah,
out of the back.
you're
And
definitely right.
like a couple years ago when Arsenal lost to West Ham, I remember like thinking like, how are we losing this team that we are so much better than? And it's
Yeah,
because they are pushing those numbers up really quickly, and you don't give time or space for it. I think that also really works well when you are facing some higher press teams.
yeah,
To get in
definitely.
behind and catch them out. So yeah, I think like that's a style that works for them. They suffer from it, but they can also do decently well. Was it 2 years ago when they were like up at the top four?
Yeah, it
And
was.
it was just surprising. It was like, how is West Ham all the way up here right now?
It's funny actually because I kind of like what you just mentioned in terms of they suffer for that style, but they also benefit heavily through that style as well. Like
Hmm.
they're never gonna they're never gonna be like a prolific possession heavy, 3-2-5 build up, trying to overload the last line. Essentially, what they're trying to do is create chances as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and that
Hmm.
is definitely highlighted in how they like to kind of create from the back. Like they play long. If they do play, like I said, they try to play very quickly into half spaces. When you think of West Ham out of possession, Ben, like what do you think?
Um, I mean, kind of much right now. Like, I don't think they're a very high pressing team. I feel like they're
Mm-mm.
probably a team that's sitting back a little bit more, waiting for those breaks. Like they'll move quickly once they get the ball back, but I don't imagine that they're fighting to get the ball back.
You
Overall,
are exactly correct. So your what's the term? Your presumption or informed presumption is completely correct, Ben.
yeah.
They have some of the lowest tackling numbers per game in the league, which isn't surprising considering that they average 16.3 PPDA per game.
Jeez.
Yeah. So like that's obviously a relatively conservative team. They're not looking to press the front line a lot.
Yeah.
Instead, they tend to kind of like sit in a medium or deep defensive block. They want to, I guess, like prioritize compactness and minimizing space in between the lines instead of chasing ball players and trying to overly rely on pressing traps.
Uh huh.
And that does, we know they are somewhat, conservative in possession. And I know that's typically how they've, I think that benefits them based on their in possession style, the ability to kind of sit deep, circuit pressure, play it forward really quickly. They've never been like a prolific pressing team. I do know like in some seasons past, they've been a little bit better in pressing along the front line, but in this season, especially under Nuno, they'd like to press in a 4-5-1.
Hmm.
I'll be honest with you. Whenever I see one up front in like a pressing structure, I typically assume of teams that want to be a little bit more kind of passive once they fall into that mid block. Ben,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That one up top is just kind of the person who's hanging out that will
yeah,
get a lucky ball. It's a poacher style, right? You're not
yeah,
necessarily focusing on doing like a group press onto a certain position. You're not focusing on a trigger to have everyone come up. Very much a opportunistic press.
it's exactly like ultimately, I don't think it's a shape where high pressing is easy, especially for the striker. You could see that with Nick Waltemada at Newcastle. He's been put into midfield because that role is really difficult. You essentially need someone who is very mobile, and
Hmm.
Gordon is much more suited to do that than Waltemada is for Newcastle. But ultimately, the one forward needs to occupy both centre backs. That's really hard in the Premier League,
Yeah.
especially the way centre backs split and have a bunch
Hmm.
of space in between one another. It's really difficult to close them down subsequently. It kind of favors to be compact, block space ultimately in between lines. So you'd see that five kind of hover from side to side, not moving a lot in terms of pressing the ball player, but blocking those half spaces so teams can actively play balls into those half spaces. Funnels opponents play wide. I mean, we both know statistically, if the ball is wide, you're less likely to concede than it is being central. So teams try and funnel balls wide to then try and create defensive overloads, so where they can kind of take advantage of the fact that the ball player is on his own and kind of steal the ball in those specific scenarios. And a 4-5-1 is actually very good for that because
Hmm.
of how many central players they have. And they win the ball more regularly in their defensive third wide than they do centrally. If I was to ask you, Ben, how you'd expect West Ham to get a result in this game, how would you respond to that?
Um, yeah, I think against Liverpool, I think scoring early is really, really important.
Yeah,
Um, Possibly taking advantage of a set piece when you're doing it. Um, Attacking through probably the left side, knowing that that's probably a little weaker right now
you're
overall
right.
defensively. Those are the kinds of things that I'd probably say would be their keys to victory.
Yeah, I agree with both those for sure. Scoring early is really important, and we'll get into why kind of when I describe the current Liverpool situation. But I think it's important for West Ham to be able to score first and hold on to a lead. I think if they are 0-0 at 60, they'd be very happy, honestly. But I don't think Liverpool, at least with my red tinted glasses on, I really don't want to see that type of game, Ben, because
Mhm.
I've seen it a lot this season, and we've not done particularly well there. I think they need to look to exploit the way our centre backs play. Kirkes is very high and wide. Sabozlai is very high, typically not as wide, a little bit more inverted. But like they have incredibly direct wingers who can hurt people on the counter attack. So I think they
Mhm.
need to do that. They need to prevent Liverpool offensive players from picking up balls in half spaces. I don't know if Verts is fit, and I'll get into that in a minute, but they want to prevent him picking up balls in those kind of half space areas. It's typically where they get hurt. So prevent that and play for long balls and fight for second balls as well. I think they have a midfield probably a little bit more combative than ours. Mateus Fernandez in the last few weeks has been quite good. Suchek is obviously very combative, so you know what to expect from him. But I
Mhm.
expect this to be really similar to how we approached the Forest game and the West Ham game. It's obviously at home, so it's just slightly different nuance to that. But I expect Liverpool to have a bunch of ball possession, especially early on, where West Ham are less incentivized because of the time to kind of hit us and try and go on long, sustaining offensive pushes, I guess. But for Liverpool, ultimately, we're getting to us. So nothing new really on the injury front. I expect Jones and Sabozlai to be at right back. I think that, at least from what I've heard, Frimpong could potentially be back in
Mhm.
training within the next few days, but I don't know if he's going to be well enough to kind of start this game. So I do expect to see Jones and Sabozlai at right back.
Yeah.
Big question for me in this game is Florian Wirtz fit enough? He was ruled out with an injury when we played Forest. He was kind of injured in the warm up and taken off because of that. Slot did say though that it wasn't anything serious, but he wasn't well enough to play the game against Forest. Our form, we've done relatively well, better than we've done most in the last few games. 2 losses with 3 wins in the last 5. We have 1.7 points per game in the Premier League, and we've done okay at home. 7 wins, 3 losses, and 3 draws at Anfield. 1.85 points per game at home, which is not as high as we have been in the last few seasons, but it's definitely not terrible. Let's go over some kind of specific situations for this game. For me, ultimately, if Florian Wirtz can't go, I think that changes how Liverpool play, Ben. We
Mhm.
saw when we played Forest that it definitely changes, especially how we don't only approach build up, but approach how we like to possess the ball in the final third.
Yeah, I wonder if there, after seeing what happened in that game, if there's an opportunity for Liverpool to change something up a little bit. I know you're at home, you're playing a side that may be countering quickly, but I wonder if there's any rotation that you could utilize with the different players in that central area.
I'd like to see a lot of Liverpool fans over the last week after the Rio Ngamoa cameo have been calling for him to start. I really
Okay.
don't think that's going to happen.
Hmm.
Truthfully, I would like to see it. I think it'd be quite fun, but I don't see it happening. I think missing a player like Verts is a big hit because we don't. I mean, not a lot of people have profiles that can kind of contribute or affect games in the same way as Florian Wirtz. So him not being there is a miss for Liverpool. But this is a game at home against a potential relegation candidate. I expect Liverpool to have a bunch of the ball and not. not struggle really with what West Ham are doing out of possession, although it's completely possible. I mean, we've seen it a bunch of times this season. Like you said, one of the big ways I think West Ham could hurt Liverpool in this game is set pieces. But overall, like, and I touched on it in the last episode, Liverpool have seen a pretty drastic improvement in set pieces. We have the best set piece differential since the turn of the year.
Mm-hmm.
We've scored 8 and conceded 2, which makes it +6. I think the team below us is +4. So you can see like a clear uptick in form when it comes to how we deal and how we deal with it and how we attack set pieces.
Yeah.
But I think that would be like although we've dealt with it much better, there has to be an emphasis on how West Ham like to or aiming to attack Liverpool. At least for me, I want to see Liverpool like perform and have a better first half performance. There have been times this year where I think we've been really poor in first halves of games, and I guess that's kind of couple-fold for the most part. In the Forest game, I think we were really poor at like controlling the ball and frankly just passing to each other. Ben, like there were a bunch of times in that game where team players that I think are really competent in possession are just super wasteful on the ball. We end up creating a bunch of high turnovers and creating more pressure for ourselves. But like not on the ball, even off the ball. I think for like first 30 minutes or 40 minutes of some of these games we played this year, we've just not been where we've needed to be out of possession, had to change structure. Maybe halfway through the first half or at the end of the first half. I just want to see Liverpool perform in the first half, Ben.
Yeah, I feel like just the kinds of the ways that Liverpool was just possessed over the weekend was kind of
Yeah.
surprising. Just didn't seem like that was how you expect them to perform.
Nah.
So I think keeping that control is going to be really important. Not being harried off the ball is going to be really important.
I agree ultimately, and I think they have to be decisive with the chances they get, especially if we look at the way West Ham want to defend their box. It's going to be deep. They're probably going to be playing a low block, 4-5-1 low block. Not a bunch of space in the middle. Liverpool's wingers need to turn up in this game. At least for me, like Liverpool's wingers in the last few weeks have been a little bit underwhelming. And you saw at Nottingham Forest, like slot opts to take both of them off and sub them at the same time, which I think is a bit of a message to me.
Yeah, definitely. Um,
Let's talk about how Liverpool can win this game then. So very much like West Ham, I think Liverpool need to score first here, and I'll tell you why. Liverpool averages 1 point per game when conceding first at home,
mm,
so they've essentially shown like an inability to, if they do concede first at home, they've shown an inability to score 2 goals after that. So going behind at home in this game could be detrimental to the overall result. I want to see like a defensive focus for 90 minutes from Liverpool in this game. Liverpool have conceded just under 50% of their goals at home from 75 to 90 minutes.
wow.
And we've made like specific errors late in games when we've been, at least in my opinion, we've been cruising,
Hmm.
and you introduce a degree of uncertainty by making those errors and letting teams back into games. So let's not do that. West Ham, on the other hand, also statistically scores more frequently in the second halves away from home. So we need
Hmm.
to, I mean, I think that's put down to a couple of reasons, right? So it's typically teams that want to defend deep will come out more later in games because they have the time in their favor in that aspect, or
Hmm.
like they don't have the time in their favor, but they're choosing to play that type of variance because there's only like, 30, 20 minutes left in the game or whatever. West Ham are definitely one of those teams. And ultimately, if Florian plays, I want to see him get the ball as much as possible. Like I said a couple episodes ago, when Florian Wirtz has the ball, Liverpool do well. All that said, Ben, what's your prediction for this game?
Liverpool home. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be 2-0. Nah, no. I'll go same differential 3-1.
3-1. Okay. I'm going to say I think Liverpool win this game 3-0. I think we do quite well in this game. Mainly because I don't know. I think Liverpool have turned a bit of a corner in the last few games. We did lose to City, but I think that's a very specific last 10 minutes type of chaos. This game isn't going to play like that at all. And I think over the last few weeks, these type of games we've typically performed a bit better in. So I'm hoping to see an uptick in Liverpool performance overall. But
Yeah.
let's get into Arsenal Chelsea then.
Yeah, definitely. Arsenal Chelsea. This is the first time they're meeting this season. They've already met in the Premier League, and have met twice in the League Cup. If we're looking overall, Arsenal really needs to bounce off of that momentum from the North London
Yeah.
derby. Getting that emphatic win at home means, sorry, away from home, means that if they can get an emphatic win at home, they're kind of in the driver's seat again, and they really need to be
Hmm.
in the driver's seat again. Uh, I think Chelsea also, it's a must win, obviously, to hold off Liverpool's attempt to get back in top five
Yeah.
from them. So it's a must win for Chelsea just to maintain that space and that gap and maintain that race for Champions League positions. This is Rosenior's eighth match, and he thus far is undefeated in the Premier League.
Which is pretty
So
impressive, actually.
yeah, it's quite impressive. And I know people talk about new manager bounce, and there's always going to be that. But it's also, what he's doing is working. He needs to show that he has what it takes to keep Chelsea in contention for UCL overall. So that's kind of like the overall view. What we'll do is I'll jump into Arsenal first, and then we can get into Chelsea after.
Okay.
So with Arsenal, injury wise, there are a couple injuries here. Some of the long term injuries that have been happening are Miguel Marino and Max Dowman. But then more recently, Ben White is back out with an injury, expected to be back early March. Kai Havertz has been out with an injury, and he's listed as doubtful for this match. But I don't know. It's Chelsea. Kai likes a goal against Chelsea. I think he's going to do his best to get back into the team. And I think if he is well enough to play, I think he'll come in and have a little cameo at the end. I think Arteta likes playing Kai Havertz and definitely likes playing Kai Havertz against Chelsea just because of what it means to him and to the team.
I think it was a little bit unfortunate when he went out from an Arsenal perspective because he was
Yeah.
connecting really well with Gyökeres in some of these
Mhm.
games. To see him kind of get injured as quickly as he did when he came back was a little bit disappointing.
Yeah, he's been struggling with injuries for almost 2 years
Yeah,
now, and so it was great that he got that start. But it was surprising to see him out injured again. I think they're being just very cautious with him, making sure that they can bring him out
yeah,
and have him really available overall. And hopefully this is the corner that needs to be turned. And he can make it through. Going into Arsenal's form, in overall form, they're three wins, two draws, doing pretty good on a pretty good run. Home form is a little different. Three wins, one loss, one draw. That loss, of course, was to United earlier this year. Um, their points per game at home is 2.46 points per game with a 77% win rate. So Arsenal's doing pretty well at home, and they like to win their games at home.
pretty well.
Um, Pretty well. 85% of the time they are scoring first at home.
That's a crazy stat.
Yeah, and when they score first, they have 2.73 points per game. And then on top of that, they have an 83% defending lead rate, which means that once they score, they maintain that lead at home.
Wow.
So like, and we'll get into like what is required for Arsenal to continue doing that. But I think when we look at it, we had expect them to have a similar kind of setup overall as they did when they were facing Chelsea in the EFL. You have your key players, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, and Capier, Rice with Mendy. I think Odegaard is back in the team for this game if he's doing well enough. I
You
don't think,
reckon?
yeah, I don't think we're gonna see Eza for this game.
Okay.
I mean,
I
otherwise
think
we
he
have
earned a
Marino.
start. Don't you agree?
I think he would have, but I think the kind of game that we're gonna see versus Chelsea is gonna be a little different. And I
Yeah.
think for that reason, I think he'll come in later on. But I think it's largely because you're gonna see Saka start this, and Odegaard's gonna
Yeah.
be that partner that they're gonna put up for Saka.
I
I don't
agree.
see Gabriel Jesus starting this. I see Gyökeres actually getting the start based on his performance.
Also deserves a start.
Yeah, also deserves a start, and I think we're gonna have to start on that left side.
Yeah.
He's a techie kind of player that you need. We may see Martinelli come in later, but overall, you're going to put this side against against Chelsea. Any other thoughts on who we'd expect to see?
I think I agree with that. We'll obviously get into the tactical setup that we expect a little bit later, but I think in
Mhm.
terms of the tactical setup that I would expect, that would be the three that I would start up front too. I think Gyökeres deserves to start given his performance in the North London derby. I do think Eze deserves to start here, but I'd understand why someone would start Odegaard over Eze, especially if he's fit.
Yeah,
And I'd say that back four right now is probably the more informed players in the back four, so makes
yeah.
perfect sense to me.
I think someone would argue that Calafiori might get the start again on here, but I don't think we're going to risk him early
Yeah,
on in this game, especially when he's been coming off of injury and just
I agree.
Calafiori needs. He's really good when he's been on a run of games, but not necessarily when he's coming off in this kind of manner. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think I think one of the best ways that Arsenal are really going to be able to play this game is going to be a lot of balls coming down the right channel and really overwhelming Gusto. He's kind of going to be one of those players. We don't have they don't have Cucurella, so it's going to be Goose starting there, and I think taking advantage of a non-starter in that position is going to be how Arteta approaches this game overall. I can also expect, and I've seen Gyökeres doing this once in a while, where he drift out to the right side that allows either Odegaard to get back in the center or Saka almost drop into that 10 position. I imagine that they might try doing that as well, just to maybe draw off some of those center backs off the center and stay on Gyökeres and just create a bit more space in the middle as well.
Yeah, that's how I would approach this game ultimately. I think, I mean, when we've seen Odegaard play more centrally, you know me, I always think he's way more dangerous if he can find the ball and pick up the ball in zone 14.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen games where Saka has started in the middle as well and been quite productive. I don't know. I think ultimately we know how Chelsea are going to probably opt to defend in this game. I think
Yeah.
trying to find space in the middle is going to be really important to getting goals in this game, and makes a bunch of sense, at least
Yeah.
tactically for me.
Yeah, and I think Arsenal's always going to exploit the set pieces as well.
Yeah,
Chelsea have conceded 12 goals from 14.05 xG from set pieces, and conceding 12 goals are tied in fourth with Leeds and Forest.
we'll
So
get more into that too.
yeah. And I think Arsenal's going to remember that, and they're going to take advantage of that.
Definitely.
Last time they played against each other, I think Arsenal did sit back a little deeper, largely because they were protecting their aggregate,
Yeah.
but when they were playing in the Premier League at Chelsea, Arsenal did take the game to them, and I expect them to challenge that again this time around.
Was that the game where they had a red card? Caicedo was sent off,
Yeah, that
wasn't
was
he?
Caicedo red card. Yeah,
I thought Chelsea were better in that game, man.
yeah.
I thought they were definitely worth a draw in that game.
Hmm.
The thing that surprised me a lot about that game is how they matched Arsenal physically. You don't
Yeah,
typically see that when teams play Arsenal.
yeah, and I think that that really is something that that you could see obviously in that game. And I think like Arsenal's going to remember that, and they're going to kind of come in and make sure that they are able to also come out physically.
Yeah,
Caicedo's in for this game. I'm going to be interested to see what that kind of matchup looks like in the
me too.
midfield. Declan Rice and Caicedo, there's a lot of narrative around there, and I think they're both going to be out here proving. Specifically, Declan Rice, he hasn't had a lot of great performance in the last couple of weeks. He gave away a really silly error at the toilet bowl over the weekend, so I think
In the
he
game, you won
lost the
4-1
gym.
in, though, so it's all
And
right.
yeah, but he gave up the goal after we like a minute after we just scored
Yeah,
our
yeah,
first. So yeah,
for sure.
um, yeah. So some keys to victory for Arsenal here. As I mentioned, like when they score first at home, they can hold on to that lead and they
Yeah,
can win. And so they gotta go and score first, and they gotta go all in for a second, right? Like we talk about stepping on throats, and yes, that sounds horrific, but like they have to
accurate.
they have to cut Chelsea off early and make sure that they can close out this game. And even after that, like honestly, just go for a third. Like there's no point in sitting back if you feel like you have Chelsea opened up, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I think
completely agree, man.
I think like if you keep going at them, like Chelsea will break. And when Chelsea concedes multiple goals, and I wish I pulled up the stats on this, can like they're gonna be playing out more and more. They're gonna commit more players up into the attacking third, which means that there's a lot of ways for Arsenal to exploit them. And Arsenal can exploit, as we've seen on the counter, very effectively with Gyökeres if he gets the right kind of delivery. And now that the team is playing a little better with Gyökeres and giving the balls that he needs, that's definitely an opportunity for Arsenal to take this game and really, really kill it off early.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think Audrey touched on overloading the channel on the right. But I think what's going to be really important is just being compact in that rest defense and not allowing João Pedro to turn and run, whether he has the ball on him or if he's running into space to get a delivery from Enzo. I think like if that happens, he's going to be dangerous and he's going to be very lethal on the ball overall.
It's a good point too. I would put Cole Palmer there too. If you allow Cole Palmer space and time, he hurts you. I think Cole Palmer, regardless of whether he's got it or not, averages some of the highest XG for attacking midfielders, or like XA and XG combined for attacking midfielders in the league.
Hmm.
So with space, he can be prolific. They need
Yeah.
to aim to kind of cut the ball off its supply for both Palmer and João Pedro. João Pedro has been a way better signing than I expected him to be.
Yeah. João Pedro is he's doing. I mean, he was pretty decent at Bournemouth, and I think sorry at Brighton, and I think like Maresca didn't quite unlock him, but some, and we'll get into this a little bit more. But I think Liam's doing a little bit more to unlock him.
Yeah,
I think finally, like Arsenal cannot make mistakes or get caught out by Chelsea's press. Chelsea, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but is a very high pressing team. So having multiple options and outlets on defense so that you can get out of the press and just keep a clear head. Don't make those errors. And if you need to, just boot the ball out. Just reset yourself, I think is going to be really important, and make sure that you're maintaining some kind of defensive positioning with your center backs so that you don't concede that kind of goal when you have your fullbacks pushing up.
I agree. It's funny actually because like my overarching opinion on this game is I think this is a very scoreboard centric game. I
Hmm.
know that sounds silly, but depending on the type of score, the game state, I think that really dictates how this specific game will be played.
Yeah.
Arsenal behind, you expect them to throw the kitchen sink at it.
Hmm.
Chelsea will fancy themselves if it's 0-0 or even potentially 1-0 behind on 60. So I think Arsenal, if they do manage to get ahead, have to put the foot on throat. Go two,
Yeah.
go three, aim to keep the pressure on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Arsenal. We'll get into Chelsea. Injury wise, I mentioned Kukurea has hamstring injury out until mid March. Gittins has been
Damn.
has a knock, and then of course Colwell's been out all season. Will be back late April. So lots of defensive injuries there. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they set up defensively. We've seen some of that already, but I think even though they've had those defensive issues, they've had a pretty decent form.
Yeah.
Their form has been 3 wins, 0 losses, 2 draws, same as Arsenal in the last 5. Their away form has been 2 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws. So not awful. They actually, I think, tied in form with Arsenal for
Yeah.
Arsenal's away form as well. So I think they're going to come in here and really try to win this. Away this season, they've been at a 1.69 PPG, with a 46% win rate and 31% draw rate. So they are still able to get points when they're away from home. They're not quite as high as Arsenal on the table for away form, but they are right below them. So Arsenal is number 1 the table in away form with 29 points, and Chelsea's number 2 in away form with 22 points, tied with Villa.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, they definitely have a lot to play for and more to gain in this game, really. Um, and we talk about scoring first. So when Chelsea are away and they're leading a defend, they're and they are leading, they have a defending rate of 86%, which means that if they score first away from
It's
home,
high.
they will kind of keep it up. And if we go back and review Arsenal's scoring first defending rate at home, it's 83%. So Chelsea is better at defending that lead away from home than Arsenal is at defending that lead at home.
Interesting.
So, and then their PPGA, their PPG when they score first in away matches is 3.0.
Fucking hell.
That's insane. It
Yeah.
is it is insane. But the one thing that I do want to say, because I was like, that's crazy. How are they doing? How are they doing this? And I dug a little deeper. I noticed that all of these were away from home, but not anyone from the top half of the table.
Makes sense.
So yes, very very impressive. But let's keep that. Let's be real about who they've faced.
Yeah.
So really good performance. That's expected performance. Honestly, that's better than what Arsenal have done, anyways. Um, but but I think keeping in perspective, like they still have some work to do here. Going into actually what I'm expecting Chelsea to see, I'm expecting Chelsea to be very direct
Yeah,
in this game. Like they've
me
had
too.
6 goals from direct play. João Pedro, as you mentioned, overall is on a streak in GA
Really
and has
good.
been the primary counter for target for counters. Of course, there is Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer is underperforming his XG right now. His open play XG right now hasn't been as sharp, but also definitely a threat. And that just means that he's going to find a rhythm soon. Now that he's back and more regularly featuring after his injuries. So they do have both those players. And I know we kind of forget about Delap, but they also have Liam Delap, so he could also turn on at any point.
He's been underwhelming this year, man. He really
Yeah.
has. I expected him when he came from Ipswich to be way more dangerous than he has been.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, he's had some injury problems, but he's just been underwhelming when he's played for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's something missing. I don't know what it is exactly. And I mean, I wonder if Moresca brought him in more because he used him or he saw his potential at City and he just hasn't seen that play out in his time at Chelsea.
I think that that's a possibility, but I think ultimately the reason they brought him in, very young, relatively cheap. I think he was around 30 mil,
Hmm.
and very different to what they have. Like he is a quite a different striker to Joao Pedro,
Hmm.
so he is a compliment to Joao Pedro. But overall, he's been not as prolific as I expected him to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he just needs a quick season
Yeah,
to get used to it, and then he'll be off running.
very possible.
Yeah. Moving on. Defensively, Chelsea have had the highest PPTA in the league, 10.2, and that's mainly what they're doing to get the ball back. You expect them to do that against Arsenal, just because it's Arsenal away. They're not going to step back on it, and Arsenal have made errors being under pressure, and I think Chelsea know that, and they're going to try to exploit that as much as possible. Chelsea are really comfortable not holding onto the ball, and will look for those triggers to overwhelm and and press on the ball. So I do expect them to kind of do that out of possession and get the ball back quickly from Arsenal.
See, but we'll get into that a bit more in a minute. But I don't expect him to play that way at all. I think if you see how they played. Actually, you know what? Let's hold off on this. We'll talk about this in a
Yeah,
minute when we talk about defensive structure.
yeah,
But let's start with how the attacking style of play or the attacking approach has changed from Maresca to Rosenior.
yeah. Let's start with that, and we can get back into the defensive structure. So I guess we're splitting off right now to kind of really focus a little bit more on style play from Maresca to Rosenoir. This is something we did for United earlier in the season. We liked this. It helped us kind of dig in deeper and really look at teams that
For
maybe we
sure.
don't pay as much attention to. So I had a lot of fun looking into this. So I think overall in the attacking context of the game, their underlying numbers are pretty strong. They have the best XG in the league, but they're actually underperforming overall in their actual goals. So if you look at their actual shots and shot quality, overall they have 48 goals coming from 52.3 xg. That is the highest xg, and that's a negative 4.3 differential, which is 10th in the league,
Not good.
which isn't good. And conversion is 13%, which is fourth in the league. So really, they should be and could be finishing their chances a lot better than they are right now. And then if we just look at that non-penalty XG, right, versus goals, that's 41 goals and 46.78 XG, which is still really high. But then that's a negative 5.78 XG differential non-penalty, which is still 17th in the league. So it's really quite a big gap overall, which surprised me a lot, especially with the kinds of players that you think that they have on the team.
You think? Because like from my perspective, if you think about what their profiles are, would you say they have a bunch of prolific finishers? Because I
I
don't.
mean, I don't know if they have prolific finishers, but I do feel like the kinds of goals that you saw Cole Palmer getting in last year, I'm surprised he's not doing that same kind of performance this year. It's probably mainly what it is. It can also feel like they do have the kinds of players who get into the right spaces to make the goals. If you think about like people like Pedro Neto, who has so much speed and can get into that,
Yeah.
get in behind. Maybe he's just not being utilized in the central location and not able to actually get the ball in. But I would expect a few more goals from Master that XG overall.
Yeah, there is like a clear underperformance there.
Yeah. And that could also be a little bit influenced by the style of play that they had in the first half of the season versus what they're doing right now, which we'll get
Good point.
into it. But a little bit more about how they're playing right now. It's been a lot more direct play overall. They've had 33 fast breaks, which is third in the league, with 5 goals coming from those fast breaks, which is fourth in the league. They've had 56 direct attacks, which is second in the league, and 6 goals, which is first in the league from that. And 10% conversion from direct attacks, which is second in the league. As I was going through it, there's a really fun metric called direct speed, which is a sequencing metric. And it's the progress of the ball divided by sequence time. So that really breaks down to the average speed of the ball movement towards the opposition goal during a sequence. So that's how quickly do you move the ball towards opposition goal in that short sequence time. They're at a 1.63 direct speed, which is second in the league. Who do you think is first in the league for that?
Oh, man, can you hear me? For some
Yeah,
reason, my mic didn't unmute.
yeah.
First in the league. My guess would be Palace.
No, it's not Palace. Surprisingly, it's City.
Interesting. I mean, they've when we've done a bit of analysis on them in the past few weeks, we've seen how quick they move the ball from back to front at times. I guess that makes a bunch of sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is also that sequence time and also the progress. I think because their sequence timing is a little faster,
Yeah.
probably why that direct speed is a little faster. Apart from direct play, looking at their possession and control, they have a 58.7% possession overall. That's third in the league. They do have that possession, and they're ranked third in successful final third passes with 2,861 successful passes in the final third, but only 22.6% of all of their successful passes are in their final third, which
Wow,
means
that's
a
quite a
lot of their
lot.
passing, a lot. And you don't think about that for a direct team.
No.
Like you think that is going to be someone who is a little bit more set back. So their direct attack really begins in the middle of the pitch where the
Yeah.
ball's going through to the final third.
That makes it sense. So they're essentially looking to play a little bit slow out from the back, but once they get the ball into midfield, they move it forward quite quickly.
Yeah, exactly. They're really great with their really top tier for like short build up sequences.
Yeah.
They've had 429 sequences that were 10 plus passes in that sequence. So they're able to build up through those plays, and 4 goals from the 81 build up plays, which is about 5%
Impressive.
conversion. And as we talked already, key players more recently have been João Pedro, 11 goals from 10 xG, 21. 0.21 xG per shot and a 22.9% conversion.
That
And
conversion
then,
has to be higher than average, right? Like quite a lot higher than
absolutely.
average.
Yeah, that is absolutely higher. I
That's
mean, their
impressive.
averaging conversion for all their goals is 13%. So that
Wow.
22% is pretty high, just for Chelsea. And then their midfield duo of Enzo and Neto, they have created 87 chances combined together, and combined for an XA of 10.74 and 6 assists.
That's good.
So if we look at that, when we look at that overall performance, I think I want to look at a couple of different things. I want to look at the change of overall setup between Maresca and Rosenoir, and then obviously next I'll get into shape and build approach, and then finally chance creation. But just overall setup, when we look at look at Maresca's overall performance in the first half of this season, he was 8, 5, and 6 with 2 PPG. So overall, like he really was focused on positional control and was dominating territory,
Yeah.
dictating rhythm, compressing the pitch, and maintaining central superiority. You can see that in the kinds of players that he used in those areas: Caicedo, James, Enzo, people who are known for like holding control and really controlling that midfield. There's shorter circulations, a much more patient build up. Does this sound familiar? Kind of structured, could be considered sometimes slow. Who does that sound like? What school of play does that sound like?
Is he bold? Sounds like Pep to me, man.
It is. I feel like it is. It's a flavor of Pep positional play.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he did work for Pep. It's very similar to the kind of football that I watch with Arsenal. So that positional play, building up, and that I think is actually what was leading to some of this higher XG, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But then if you compare that with Rose Noir, right? He is a lot more transitional and direct, and that's what we're seeing right now. A lot more vertical, fast possession. There's less emphasis on like controlling tempo and more emphasis on rotations and quick possessions, those early switches. And so like what he's really trying to do is attacking the spaces before the block's set. So there's really a dichotomy of the season. So like looking at the stats and the data, I was like, I want to see what these two look like as they were building up overall. Have you seen anything else between like a general play style between Maresca and Rose Noir in an attacking way?
I would say like you've seen a clear uptick in how Joao Pedro is performing. And if you think
Mhm.
about like how his overall play style is, I think Joao Pedro is much more effective when he can carry the ball towards the goal. Exactly the same as Cole Palmer. I don't
Mhm.
look at those guys as like super effective possession controllers, but
Yep.
more pick up the ball in space and have an impact. And based on the stats you've just presented, I can see that Rosenior has managed to implement like a more, it's not like direct in the traditional sense, but they play through the lines quicker, and I think that
Yeah.
will actively benefit two players like that.
Yeah, yeah, and you can also see that starting in the back with like overall like build up, right? Like Maresca was really focusing on a 3-2 structure. So you have your
Yeah,
fullbacks who inverts into a midfield, and the other fullback who gets into the center back position. So with a double pivot, overload in the midfield, a 3-2-5 against teams who are sitting back,
yeah.
and creates those overloads in zone 14. Very risk aversive and really controlling risk, I would say. The center backs would rotate, circulate, open up interior half spaces, and then would really see very few long speculative balls from that
No,
position.
so few.
Yeah, exactly. And then and when you're in the final third, it's very positional, very rehearsed football. Wingers stay wide to stretch. The 10, usually Palmer operates between the lines, and the forward really pins people back into the defenders so that you can try to, you know, put the ball into smaller spaces and get a goal that way. So
It's a
really
good
very
point.
positional play.
I like what kind of Enzo has done on the season. I think although like on paper he starts in a pivot, I think he's been really good at utilizing half spaces. I mean, you show me that stat with the expected assists between him and Pedro Neto. And for someone that's watched quite a few Chelsea games this year, I think Enzo Fernandez has been really productive in finding space in half spaces. And he's a really decorated passer anyway. Like he's a very versatile passer,
Mhm.
and you can see that when he has the ability to play the ball forward from those spaces. So I really like that bit of analysis, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I think I feel like when you have those kinds of players, they can do really well in that build up shape. You kind of need like a trigger, right?
Yeah,
And because they have that depth of, I guess, positional control, the next step is really like, how do we then unlock that? And I
I
think,
agree.
that's what Rosnar is doing right now. He's building up with a 2-3 shape where those center backs split wide. And you're still kind of overloading that midfield, but your fullbacks are pushing a lot earlier, which makes football very vertical.
Yep,
It gets you into the second phase really quickly, and then you attack from a 2-5 instead of a 3-2-5. Sorry, you attack from a 2-3-5 in a lot faster, more like vertical way, so that you don't like have as much of a rigid structure, but you
completely
have a
right.
bit more rotations in that.
Yeah, I would say like the biggest difference for me from like a 3-2 to a 2-3 is I think a 3-2 allows you to play it easily back to centre backs,
Hmm.
to where imagine like an M
Yeah,
versus a W, so to speak.
yeah,
That's typically the differentiation, but I
yeah.
guess the biggest difference for me is the ability to, for a with a 2-3 specifically, allowing to play the ball into those spaces and move it forward faster. But I'd say the 3-2 is kind of, it leans a little bit more to like structured patient build up,
Hmm.
which I think both of them specialize in, but one wants to get the ball forward a little bit quicker. What I was loving under Maresca actually was how Reece James was falling into the central parts of the pitch. I think he's
Hmm.
such a gifted football player.
Yeah, I felt like, and he still has opportunity to do that, but he does it in a bit more aggressive way.
Yeah,
Whereas Reece James would probably be at the top of the first third. Right now, you see him a lot more in the midfield,
yeah,
right in the center of the pitch. Like this kind of football, like I think it really works for those attacking, like speedy wingers as well as
me
forwards.
too.
And I feel like, and we talked about this a few weeks ago about the artificial transitions that De Zerbi was doing. Um, First at Brighton and then at Marseille. I feel like that's almost kind of what you're seeing here too. Not necessarily as much of an artificial transition, but like just a transition that that triggers faster overall.
I agree, and I think like from a defensive perspective, I think you'll see in the next few weeks when teams start to get more footage on how Rosenior wants to build up, you'll see
Yeah.
teams a little bit more reluctant to kind of press forward
Mm-hmm.
and to essentially fall back into a block much earlier in that passing sequence.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting. I mean, teams that want to move it forward faster, I think having more players in midfield to receive the ball is better. It kind of gives you more passing angles there.
Yeah.
But it is like do we want to pass around the back for a more consistent amount of time, trying to bring people onto us to create room, or are we just going to create the room ourselves to having more midfield players? It's an interesting what's the term? Kind of like variable on one another.
Yeah, exactly. Like you are looking at getting up the pitch and creating those chances in ways that are a bit more dynamic, less expected, and that's the kind of things that you kind of want to do, especially when you're in a transitional period with the club
Yeah,
and really trying to set up the rest of your season for success. Which I want to now get into chance creation. We kind of talked about overall style play, how they build up, and so it really comes down to chance creation, and goals is what football's about. So how was Maresca creating chances, and how are we doing it now? How are they doing it now? So as I mentioned already, it's very structured chance creation, locking in the midfield line, create those central overloads, manufacture the high quality shots from inside the box, and this is where I think we see that differential of goals versus xG,
yeah,
which they're still paying for. You see such high XG and fewer speculative shot efforts, but maybe they're not going in overall. So these designed attacks, not improvised attacks, are creating a lot of XG, but maybe because you don't have the finishing. We talked about they're not prolific finishers on this team. Because of that, you're not actually getting the results that you have created for yourself.
yeah. You're right. Like if you're actively generating that amount of XG and not putting it away, it has to kind of fall at some, I guess, some variable is actively being involved there. And I guess like what you just referred to makes a bunch of sense in that regard. It's funny though, because I do put on the idea of if you think about like the striking profiles they have and the forward profiles they have, I
Mm-hmm.
can't think of a player that I would consistently rely on to score. I know that Joao Pedro is definitely emerging as someone like that, and I think he
Yeah.
showed propensity to do that at Brighton.
Mm-hmm.
But need a bit more of a sample size from him at this stage, I think, for me to like
Yeah.
actively say that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I think like this there's some edges that need to be like smoothed out, and I
Yeah,
think
yeah. That's the way of putting it.
that will happen, right? They're all still significantly younger than some of the more like
It's such a good
strikers
point.
that you think about,
We
right?
forget how young this team actually is, man. A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
times.
But if you look at Rosnar in his chance creation, he does work towards speed and disruption, more pressing. We talked about early crosses before the blocks are set, quick switches and attacks and semi transitions. He is less about like fixing the opponent in place and getting through them and cutting them apart, and more about catching them unsettled and getting past them. They'll produce like more mid value shots, but with just a higher shot volume overall, and a lower average shot quality, but the goals are going, the balls are going in the net, and that's really what matters the most.
Yeah, definitely.
And so to kind of put a wrap on this, I kind of looked at the two managers and looked at some kind of overall attacking performances. So if you look at Maresca's record, he was, as I mentioned, 8, 5, and 6. That's 2 PPG.
I could do the Rosenior one on this
Yeah, yeah.
specific
Go ahead. Go
example.
ahead.
So Maresca, as Ben just said, 2 points per game. Rosenior has a current record of 4 wins and 2 draws, 2.33 points per game, which there is a clear uptick there. Obviously,
Yeah,
less of a sample size, but there is an uptick.
Yeah, yeah. I would call Maresca's attacking mentality a bit more controlled, suffocating overall.
Yeah, and I think from what we've seen statistically, kind of tempo and incision really comes from Rosenior, the ability to play slowly and kind of invite those tempo changes really quickly to play quicker through the lines.
Yeah. And when we're looking at risk overall, Maresca is low chaos, high structure, positional play ball.
Very, yeah, very akin to like Pep, Guardiola,
Yeah.
very akin to Arteta, like teams that like to have positional dominance, rest defense.
Hmm.
Rosenior, on the other hand, I'd say, I mean, we have the stats to back it up. Likes to accept a little bit more chaos. Likes to create space by stretching the pitch vertically, and
Yeah.
creates a bunch of chances through doing that.
Exactly. And like and all of that with the kind of chance source for Maresca comes in through zone 14, passes through there, cutbacks, and those positional rotations, really controlling the ball and getting it into the places they want to get it into.
It's a good point. And on the flip side, I'd say kind of what helps Rosenior create chances in terms of his overall attacking structure. I think Joao Pedro has like a much more, what's the term, like varied position to where he can pull wide to pick up the ball and he can
Mhm.
create quite a lot of chaos in those regards. Early crosses, obviously, before teams' blocks are set, really helps as well. And the ability to transition through Enzo, pushing the ball up high, Neto running in behind, or like marauding channels, I think is also really effective for that side too.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was really hard to look at the stats because of like how much it's changed, but the stats that really impacted, like Maresca had that high possession football, he had that high XG from structured attacks,
Yeah.
and really that led to like him controlling the overall tempo of the games. While that was helpful, I just don't think it was what the team was wanted to do really based on their overall structure.
Yeah, and I'd say like when Rosenior came in, you could see a much larger emphasis on kind of faster attacks, more like game state volatility. They
Yeah.
react really heavily to how the scoreboard looks, and ultimately just like more transitional exposure both ways, both defensively and offensively. Just a different mindset and approach, I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you look at the two managers, it's weird. It's weird to think that this team works out for both managers, and not maybe in the way that it that you'd expect it, but it's really amazing to see what footballers can do when they're given different kinds of direction and meeting
Yeah,
those direction. But yeah, that's kind of I want to wrap that up for the attacking. Anything else you have thoughts on attacking before we move into the defending shape?
not really. I would like to say that I mean you could see based on XG that they've been really prolific in terms of overall like chance creation this year. I think there has to be some address in the summer on how they go to approach putting more of those chances away. But
Hmm.
it depends also what they're looking to do with the manager. Like they've given him the reins full time, so I'd like to see how he kind of molds this team a little bit into more of like a quote unquote senior ball as
Yeah,
opposed to Maresca ball.
yeah.
Cool. Let's get into the defensive stuff then. So I did the boring stuff this time, guys. Let's talk about. So we have a few metrics to go over here, very similar to how we approached the Carrick and Amarim. I'm going to speak specifically about them like on a season wide scale because what they've done, what they've changed defensively, actually isn't that much different. But let's talk about like the difference or the percentage of minutes in terms of time spent leading, level, and trailing. In terms of leading, they've spent 36% of time of games leading. The league average is 25, so that is quite a little bit higher than that actually. In terms of game state where it's level, they've spent 47% of the time, which is around average. Average in the league currently is 50%, so it's not too dissimilar to that. And trailing, on the other hand, they're quite a little bit below average, so actually above average, so they're performing higher than expected. League average is 25%, and they're 17% currently. So it shows that they favor the scoreboard on their side more times than not, based on those statistics, Ben.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy overall. I feel like the averages really show you where the teams are pushing their
Yeah.
focus and how they're playing their games.
And I find the percentage of trailing and leading really impressive because
Mhm.
it goes to show like, are you a team that tries to take control of the game early to push for a lead, or are you a team that's looking to sit back, very akin to West Ham, try and get a lead like somewhat later in games because you've managed to soak up pressure. You can see
Hmm.
Chelsea are kind of in the more favorable side of that. Let's talk about their kind of what they concede in terms of shot location profile. I'm
Hmm.
going to say this outright and say they are one of the worst performers in the league for this. They are good at preventing shots, but when they do concede shots, they concede them in really dangerous areas. And I'll back this up with some stats. So, percentage of shots inside the box is 69.93, which makes them the fourth lowest, which is
Jeez.
very bad for a team that is like structurally quite good.
Hmm.
Conceding that many shots inside the box isn't great, and it gets even worse because the percentage of goals conceded inside the box is 90.32. It means they're not conceding a lot outside the box, but when
Hmm.
teams typically get inside the box and can create those chances, they're converting them to a pretty high degree, and they're the second lowest in the league for that.
Yeah.
Overall shots against, and you can see how they're not conceding a lot of shots, but they're conceding when they do concede shots are of relatively higher quality. Their shots against overall are 269, which is the fourth best in the league.
Hmm.
The teams you expect to be performing higher are higher than them in the table at the moment. I think that's Chelsea. No, that's Arsenal, City, and United.
Hmm.
In terms of save percentage, I'd say Robert Sanchez is really disrespected more often than not. He's done quite well in this league,
Hmm.
especially this year. He has a save percentage of 70.8, which is the fourth best in the league. So you can see like they're conceding fewer shots than they were last year, but the shots that they are conceding are of higher value, but they're still managing to be a huge overperformer in XG. And we can talk through that as well. So like goals and shot quality. In terms of goals against this year, they've conceded 31, which is pretty good in terms of the overall view of the league. In terms of XGA, though, they've conceded 37.37, which is eighth, which is a big
Okay.
differential difference, Ben. That's point zero minus 6.37, which is the fourth best in the league. So they are the
Yeah.
one of the highest, I think top two highest overperformers in the league for XGA. You can look at that in a few ways, right? So you could look at teams underperforming in terms of finishing or good goalkeeping. That kind of falls into the save percentage I showed you earlier. So Sanchez is making some saves that you typically wouldn't expect him to based on XG.
Yeah.
Overall, they're performing quite well in that regard. So they're conceding few chances that are of higher quality, but when they do, they're typically in the box and they end up going in. Robert Sanchez is typically performing quite well on a season-wide basis, but let's talk about how they are kind of like a duel or physicality standpoint. Are they
Hmm.
winning their battles ultimately, Ben? Especially how the modern Premier League has transpired. Transitions and the ability to kind of win duels has become more and more important. They're fourth best in the league with a percentage of ground duels won with 51.1% per game. Aerial duels won, they're 51.7, was the sixth best in the league, which is actually kind of funny because if you think about their centre back profiles, they don't
Yeah.
typically have like super dominant aerial centre backs, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, that is quite surprising, and I wonder if that's just because they're getting the right locations at the right
Yeah,
time, or if they're just not facing as many aerial duels or aerial threats,
yeah,
because of the teams not wanting to go above them.
it's a good point. In terms of tackles and interceptions per 90, they have 16 tackles per 90, which is about mid table, but they do have 10 interceptions per 90, which is the best in the league.
Okay.
I put that almost completely on Moises Caicedo, honestly.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the best DMs in the league when it comes to overall anticipation of passes coming forward, and the way he cuts the ball off and gets to it early is really impressive. Obviously, it's not just him; it's a collective effort, but I think he is a big catalyst for that. Blocks per 90. So their blocks per 90 is three, which is the fifth lowest. You can see they have a lot of possessional domination where they won't need to make a bunch of blocks. And exactly the same for clearances per 92 with 24, which is the fifth lowest.
Hmm.
Let's talk about errors leading to goals as well. So they've conceded 5 goals from errors. They've conceded 22 shots from errors, which is around mid-table, so they're performing quite well in there. And as Ben touched on just now in some of his analysis, their PPDA is 10.2, which is the first in the league. So they are the most efficient forward pressers in the league.
Yeah.
Defenses have the fewest amount of passes before they end up making a defensive challenge, which is quite impressive. Goals conceded from fast breaks, 2, which is upper mid-table. They've done quite well at defending that. And their overall average line depth is around 34.5 meters, which is around mid-table. They don't
Okay.
have the most aggressive line. What that shows, though, is how their pressing structure is good. Because if you don't have the ability to kind of squeeze the pitch to win the ball back, you have to know how to approach pressing triggers and when to press the ball player. And you can see based on their PPDA, they're really effective at that. Let's talk about when Chelsea typically concede their goals. So we've spread it typically in 15-minute increments where it makes sense. So Chelsea are better than average defensively from 16 minutes to 30 minutes and from 46 to 60. So they concede less goals than average in those periods. They're around average for 31 to 45 and 61 to 75. They are slightly below average in both the start of game and right at the end of the game. So 0 to 15 and 76 to 90. I would say like trends in the Premier League this season suggest more goals have been conceded later in games. Average is 8 and Chelsea are about 9.5. So they're underperforming that specific metric. Why that is, I think there's a few specific scenarios you could talk through. Maybe they're not making subs the way they should. Maybe they actively have leads and are sitting back in those periods in games. There's a few scenarios to go over. Set pieces, which you alluded to just now, then they're really not doing great from set pieces this season, Ben. And I remember earlier in the season, offensive set pieces, they're actually doing very well, but right now they're not particularly defending great from set pieces. They've conceded 12 goals from set pieces, which is the second highest in the league.
Yeah.
38.71 of their goals are conceded from set pieces, which is also the third highest in the league. 0.82 of their shots conceded are also from set pieces, which is the second highest in the league. And 37.59 of their XGA is conceded from set pieces, which is the second highest in the league, which shows a clear part of attack for Arsenal for me. You take advantage
Yeah.
of these situations.
Yep. Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, let's talk a little bit quickly about their structure and we're getting to the game predictions then. So I'm going to be using this as an example. I remember touching on earlier. I don't expect them to use this PPDA approach that we were talking about earlier. We got to see in the second half or the second leg of the Carabao Cup how they were willing to play, and this is how they opted to play in this specific game. They were switching from a 5-2-3 and a 5-3-2 shape depending on how they want to approach build up. They were going long a lot of times, which is unlike what they've been doing for a lot of the season. Ultimately, the point of this was to combat Arsenal's attacking width. We know how Arsenal like to create triangles out wide, and their aim through kind of putting five at the back was to prevent players finding positions in that kind of rotational triangle that Arsenal like to do, and it worked quite well. Essentially, what they did is they dropped fullbacks to be slightly deeper and wider, basically adding like an extra defender against Arsenal's attacking width, which you could see based on how, like I said, Arsenal like to consistently rotate within those triangles. Timber will be somewhere, Odegaard will be somewhere, Saka will be somewhere, and they're consistently switch. And they decided to try and kind of counteract the overload by putting as many players on each side as they can when the ball was over there. Two midfield players in front of the defense ultimately help screen through balls and slow down Arsenal's build up through central areas. I would say Arsenal have the quickest build up anyway, but the ability to stop their dangerous players essentially from getting on the ball quickly up high was something that they really wanted to do in that game.
Yeah.
Ultimately, their main aim was prioritizing compactness and ultimately not wanting to take risks. The aim is to keep Arsenal arm's length away from their goal, kind of limiting penetration between the lines and reducing any quick play through midfield, as I just said. I'd say they opted to defend deeper for long periods of the game, especially in the first 60. And if you remember, people were calling him kind of stupid because I know they do concede really late, but they do stop Arsenal from scoring in a lot of that game. Like try and they try and keep the scoreline or the scoreboard in their favor for as long as possible. And they start to attack when it gets to 60, 70 in that game. And like I said just now, I think this is how they're going to approach this game again. I think it's going to be quite a defensive game from Chelsea. Yeah, kind of goes against what they've typically done. They've typically been really aggressive and high pressing, but I think they're going to repeat a similar game plan to what they did in the Carabao Cup semi-final. With all that said, Ben, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen in this game? What's your prediction?
I think it's gonna be 3-1 Arsenal.
3-1
in this
Arsenal.
game. Yeah.
3-1. So
I think
for
they're gonna
me,
keep a clean sheet.
okay. For me, this is the one that I predicted you draw, and I
Yeah.
stand by that. I think it's going to end 1-1.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to end 1-1. I think based on what we predicted in the last few episodes, I do think you win the rest of the games in that block of five. But I think this is one of the ones that you actually come away with a draw. Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about this upcoming game. This is a really important game in the title race. This is probably one of Arsenal's hardest games left remaining, if I'm right, Ben.
Yeah, we have this, and then we have City away
Yeah,
after
yeah.
this.
So
Yeah,
this is
these
going
are
to be the
these are
type
big
of
games.
scenario where City hope you drop points. I don't know. 1-1. I can see Arsenal winning it too. I almost guarantee there's a set piece goal from this for Arsenal.
Yeah, that I'm counting on that.
For sure. Yeah, that's pretty much everything today, at least from us. Do you have anything else, Ben?
No, I'm very excited for this weekend. How we go through this game. I think like looking at this analysis helped me kind of see what I could learn a little
Yeah,
bit more from what Chelsea's doing, and hope you all got that too.
exactly. Yeah. Let us know what you think of these kind of structured types of, I guess, tactical breakdowns, anywhere where you feel we can improve or address in the framework we like to propose. But apart from that, guys, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for listening to the Regista Football Podcast. It's been a pleasure. Catch you next time.
Cheers, y'all.
Cheers, guys.